You can do it for a year and then go somewhere. But he won't. He'd like it.
I was going to put him back on his desk just to be funny. Is that Senor CFR?
Okay, looks like we just need a couple more people, so I'll give it another minute. It looks like we have all the JTAB members present. I do not see Matt Dias, however. Sarah, do you want us to give another minute for Matt, or should we go ahead and start?
I think you can go ahead and start. Sorry, I'm in my car, you guys.
He's there now, so we're all present. Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone to the December 15th JTAB. It's our last JTAB meeting of 2020. I'm Kim Felstead. I'm Park City's transit manager. And if we're ready to get started, Cindy, would you please go ahead and call the roll for us?
Good morning. With Summit County Council members, it looks like we have Kim Carson and Chris Robinson. Park City Council members, we have Tim Henney and Steve Joyce. Summit County staff is Tim Fisher and Jamie Danzy. I did not see Caroline. Park City staff, we have Matt Diaz, Sarah Pierce, Kim Felstead, Vinnie Newen, Scott Birmingham, Robbie Smoot, Jerry Benson, Andy Stevenson, John Robertson, and Benjamin Johnson. If I missed anybody, please let me know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Appreciate that. Okay, we'll go ahead and read our electronic meetings determination. This meeting will be an electronic meeting without an anchor location as permitted by Utah Code Open and Public Meetings Act, Section 52-4-2074, as amended June 18th, 2020, and Park City Resolution 05-2020, adopted on March 19th, 2020. The written determination of a substantial health and safety risk required by Utah Code Section 52-4-2074 is attached as Exhibit A. Board members will connect electronically. Public comments will be accepted virtually as described below. To comment virtually, please raise your hand on Zoom. Written comments submitted before or during the meeting will be entered into the public record but not read aloud. For more information on participating virtually and to listen live, please go to www.parkcity.org. Exhibit A, determination of a substantial health and safety risk. On November 9th, 2020, the mayor determined that conducting a meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. Utah Code Section 52-4-2074 requires this determination and the facts upon which it is based, which include Governor Herbert's declared a COVID-19 state of emergency on November 8th, 2020. Summit County has extended its emergency declaration and public health emergency declaration through January 8th, 2021. Statewide COVID cases and hospitalizations are increasing exponentially. This determination is valid for 30 days and set to expire on January 8th, 2021. Okay. And it appears that we did not receive any written public comment. Would anyone like to address the JTAB at this time for items that are not on the agenda today? Do we have anyone, Andy, that you see?
Nope,
online?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. I did want to take a moment to introduce our new finance administrator for transit, Benjamin Johnson. Not to put you on the spot, Benjamin, but would you mind just giving a brief intro of your history and why we're so happy to have you here at Park City?
Thank you, Kim. I originally come from this area, just over the hill in Midway was where I was raised, and my background is a decade and a half of management experience with the state of Utah, specifically the Division of Securities. In that capacity, I handled regulatory compliance with licensing of stockbrokers, investment advisors, reviewing securities registration filings, as well as white collar fraud investigation work. So I'm delighted to be here with all of you, and I look forward to getting to know all of you better.
Great. Thank you, Benjamin. All right. It looks like we do not have any consent items today. So we'll go ahead and move on to our first discussion item, and that's the consideration to approve our meeting minutes from the November 17th, 2020 JTAB meeting. Are there any changes to the meeting minutes?
I move adoption.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Go ahead and get the meeting minutes entered into the record then. Thank you. And our first topic today, or second topic, I should say, is Quinn's Park and Ride traffic study update. So John Robertson, are you ready to walk us through that?
I am. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. I did want to just briefly kind of just give a few reminders about the project a little bit, just as we move forward. So this project had previously been identified in the 2016 interlocal agreement. Additional mass transit tax is one of the projects to move forward with that tax, along with the Ecker Hill project. County took on Ecker Hill, and city has taken on Parks or Quinn's Junction as a part of the agreement with the projects for the tax that was approved. And through this extensive evaluation, we did look at a number of locations, but through an extensive evaluation, we did determine that due to its proximity to 40 and some other advantages that with respect to land cost and other things, this was the site that was the easiest to get implemented and quickest to get done and address the needs, which the city is trying to do in improving transit services throughout the area. So we did that and have moved forward in that direction. And as we began the process of getting it permitted, the UDOT did come in and ask and request that we do a traffic impact study, which we did prepare. That draft was submitted to the county and to UDOT, and we've spoken with both the county and UDOT about initial comments. So it's currently being updated. The main results or the main concerns that kind of came out of that had to do with the intersection of Old 40 and State Route 248. There was a concern that the queue might back up further into the intersection, creating problems for the interchange and other things. So our consultant AECOM did an additional analysis to look at exactly when that queue would back up into the intersection, because in the draft study, what they had assumed was that at half capacity of the parking lot, the queue at that intersection would only have 1 or 2 cars in it in the peak period. But they looked at what would happen and this was at the request of the county, what would happen at full build out and full use of that parking lot. And it was determined that there was, the queue would back up into that intersection in the morning peak. And so there was some issues there that we needed to address. It's typically, though, when a project is approved, you don't assume full capacity for a little while. So what we felt was there were some improvements we needed to do, but we could push those improvements down further down the road a little bit, not often indeterminately, but do them at a later date and allow the project to move forward. So in talking with the UDOT, what we determined was that there was 2 options that we could do to this. One was to install a signal at Old 40 and 248 and interconnect it with the signals at the interchange in order to make sure that they worked in conjunction and did not allow that queue to back up into the intersection. The other option was to move the intersection itself further to the east. And from looking at the geometry that's out there, about the best we could move it would be about 150 feet to the east, which would then give us a little bit more length of storage in that left turn pocket, and would handle that queue that does occur in the mornings when the lot is full. So those are 2 options that we can consider. And the other option, I guess, for third would be combining, move to the east and also look at doing the signal at the same time in that new location. We did have some initial costs prepared for that. To install the signal, it's approximately $250,000 to $270,000. And then to move the interchange, it was determined that the cost of that would be anywhere from $500,000 to $600,000. Together, they were over $800,000 for those improvements. So what we're proposing to do is that these improvements would be required, but we would like to do them at a future date so that we can keep the rest of the project moving forward. And we feel that the queue wouldn't be a problem until at a later date. And so that's what the TIS showed. Our consultant is doing the update to it right now, and that will be returned back to the county and to UDOT for review and comment. So that's my report for the update to the TIS and the findings of it.
Hey, John, is this something that UDOT would be interested, or interested in? That's probably the wrong way to frame the question, but is this these future improvements, is that something that UDOT might contribute financially to, or will they take the position of, you guys knew what you were getting yourselves into and therefore it's all on you?
In discussion with them, Tim, they were actually presenting the idea of doing some studies at the interchange itself. And so they were very interested in yes, participating in that if needed, because that was the other thing about maybe pushing some of this off to a later date, was because they're going to look at that intersection. And when they do, they might decide to change its geometry. And they were like, okay, well, maybe we should start looking at this a little bit sooner rather than later. And yes, they would be looked to participate in the cost of those. So there is potential there. Yes, nothing's been confirmed, but there was definitely potential and interest in that, Tim.
Yeah, so that's good to hear. I just wanted to know that it was not a dead on arrival due to decisions that we might be making today with respect to future participation. So that's good to hear. Okay. is it something that would fit into the normal 5-year work plan or time horizon? I know we always hear that UDOT, doesn't look at anything. You have to be looking 5 years out. So is this something that they're considering studying 5 years from now, or would it be 7 years from now because it's just in the consideration phase at UDOT, or is it something that could happen sooner?
There was no commitment and really talk about that, Tim, but I think we could, if we see the need happening sooner rather than later, I believe they would move it up in their 5 years, within their 5-year program, and we could have it being looked at sooner rather than later. There was no confirmation about that, but the interest we had from them in the discussion leads me to believe I think they would bump it up if we had the interest and support from the city and the county to move that analysis forward.
I believe that the county would be very supportive of doing an overall interchange analysis there, with some look to a future project. It's such a key intersection to Park City and the county, and especially and Wasatch County as well. That I think we need to look at it in that respect.
And UDOT was supportive of that effort.
John, this is Steve Joyce. I know we kind of had the park and ride is kind of tucked between the old 40 frontage road and the on-ramp to 40. If you knew for a fact that you were going to be moving the frontage road 150 feet east or whatever you described it as, would you design, if you knew that up front and you were going to do that up front, would you design the park and ride differently? Because now all of a sudden you've kind of got 150 feet to work with that you didn't before.
There's some, my first answer, Steve, would be no, because we have some challenges there with some grade that, there's a pretty steep slope right next to that intersection of Old 40. And so that limits a little bit what we can do. Plus those large power poles that go through there, and any disturbance of those would really push this project off for an even longer date. So given those constraints, I don't think this movement of that further to the east, that intersection, would really create much of a difference for this, on the current design, I should say. The one thing that it might be able to do is provide us with an opportunity to bring our buses in a little bit closer to right now they're kind of going up Old 40 to about halfway into the lot, and having that moved out a little bit to the east might provide some area where we could provide some more staging areas and stuff, but that's about it that I would say.
Okay, thank you.
John, this is Chris Robinson. I don't understand how the signaling of that frontage road would work. Is there any way you could do a quick diagram of how that would, wouldn't that just create a greater slowdown in the operation of the intersection?
Well,
another set of turning movements there.
The signal would have to be interconnected with the signals at the on and off ramp so that they worked in conjunction. And that way, because you're right, if they didn't, there'd be the potential that the queues would still develop for the individual turning movements. And so by interconnecting them with the off ramp and on ramps, they work together and don't allow those queues to build up as extensively as possible.
The fear with always, we'll say, yeah, we'll do it later, is when is later and how do we know that it gets built if it's not part of the initial project?
Chris, I think the saving grace is we've already talked in JTAB a number of times and outside of that as well on the 40 intersection having to be overhauled. And I think if you had the county, the city, and UDOT all nodding their heads that this probably has to get done, then I think the 40 intersection is going to have to get done anyway, and it's in the plans. So I don't think it's quite the extension to go, will this get done? Because I think it's basically just piggybacking on something that everybody knows has to be done. I mean, we see traffic back out onto 40 over and over and over again, and that's just unsafe.
The concept of moving at 150 feet of view, explored moving it further. 150 feet doesn't seem to me as a layman would provide any real relief.
Well, currently the queue that would back up at when it's full, with the current design and when the parking lot's full, is about 250 to 275 feet. So it gets it right to that intersection, or the next signal for the off ramp and on ramp. So giving it 150 feet actually provides another 4 or 5 cars that you could get in there during those peak times, which does resolve some of that. But with an interconnected signal, it would also help ensure that that queue didn't back up into the intersection.
I think that I like the idea of the city and the county engaging immediately to figure this out, so that we make sure we lay out this park and ride in the best way that will accommodate future changes that UDOT may, or we may have to collectively install. Of course, your revised study will give us some, hopefully, insight into, what that might look like.
Yeah, that's good, but I don't think that's what the decision is that's before us today. I think this has been brought up so we can look at whether there's a critical flaw in moving ahead with this park and ride that affects the interchange, or vice versa. Does the interchange, the conceptual redesign, represent a critical flaw to the park and ride? So I think, we're moving ahead with this.
I'm not suggesting we don't move ahead with something here. I'm suggesting that we dot our I's and cross our T's with respect to this important intersection.
One of the concerns that I have is regarding the traffic that will continue to increase coming on the old 40 from the Silver Creek Village area. And there's some other land, of course, that we have one development application in for now. And this is the only relief valve for that area. And I don't know that those numbers were accounted for in that traffic study.
Kim, I'll double check on that. That's typically what we do strive to do, though, and what consultants will try to do is ensure that any new development coming in, or planned or proposed development comes in, or a zone change in an area, is taken into consideration when they do their traffic numbers. But I can confirm that and make sure it's clear in the study that the total volumes and total number of projects that were considered when they looked at future traffic volumes.
Great, thanks, John. I just didn't know how far away they look at project developments, because that's on the other side of the Summit exit.
Do we have any additional comments or questions on the traffic study? All right.
We will continue to move the forward, but I agree with everything that's been said so far. It is definitely the improvements that I suggested, the signal and or moving of it, are definitely something that's needed. And I will stay on top of it to ensure it. And what I'd like to do is just start looking at creating and working with UDOT, because they might be doing something too, but start getting these projects on a project list that does move this forward. Because we do know that in the future, that once that lot is full, we will see some issues and we want to address it. Plus all the other things that we've talked about that we know are concerns of this location. But this is definitely something that I want to keep looking at too, because I realize it could be an issue and I don't want to put a project out that's going to just create more problems.
Okay.
So thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. And we can go ahead, I guess, and move on to operational updates. Andy, if you would please pull up the PowerPoint. Okay, go ahead and go to the first slide if you would. So our TOC, or our Transit Operations Center, is open for business. We were in there this last weekend and found it very beneficial to be there so that we could assist with traffic and support the buses out there in the system. So our hours are 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., 365 days a year. From this point forward, that Operations Center will be manned full time. And I just listed the numbers here in the event someone, needed the VMS signs changed because the parking lots are filling up at the resorts. They would call in to the primary number and we would go ahead and execute that change. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Are there any questions on the TOC before I jump into kind of where we're at on service? Okay. So I just wanted to show you, this is a chart that we've showed you in the past, just kind of demonstrates how we downsized our service with the pandemic and the ending of winter. And then now you can see we're kind of ramping back up. So we are in full winter service as of Sunday. We went to the full winter service and we're seeing the ridership tick up with that. Obviously the resort employees are in town. This last weekend, with a lot of the skiers in that, it was around 4,000 to 4,500 a day. So nothing like years past, but it is starting to go up again. And as you can see, we're starting to increase our staffing levels to adjust for that. We are not fully staffed yet, but we are continuing to work on that. We're about 6 to 8 positions short right now, but we are very optimistic that we'll be able to fill that. And certainly we should be able to cover the work as planned with the 35% cut in winter service this year. Okay, so basically what changed from November 15th to December 13th with our service was just adding some frequency on the line in the peak hours. So at certain times of the day, the line will have 15-minute service. And then same for the white, adding frequency. So it's 15-minute service from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., which was determined those are the hours that most people are traveling on those routes. So that is the important change that happened just this last Sunday to accommodate the increased ridership. Next slide. And Andy, if you would, maybe just give us a quick update on where we're at with our American Public Transportation Health and Safety SIL.
Yeah, so if not everyone is aware, we're participating in the APTA Health and Safety Commitments Program, excuse me, which means that there's just a set of guidelines that we have to follow, things that we were already doing. But what we got from participating in that program was a lot of these different kind of graphic, excuse me, assets. So this right here is like the safety seal. So we put one of those on all of our buses. We put really durable flyers in all of our buses and some other materials. We're working on getting kind of announcements. So when you're riding the bus, you'll hear an announcement that Mayor Andy recorded. And Kim, do you want me to play that?
Yeah.
Okay, give me just 1 second.
This is the announcement that we'll be playing inside the bus as people are traveling down the road. There is also a Spanish version as well.
Sorry about that. Let me make sure. Just holler if you can't hear this. I'm not sure how well it's going to play.
Still not hearing anything.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know if there's a way directly to play it. Maybe it's just not going to work. But yeah, so we have announcements that are going to play at a set interval just so people can hear on the buses, along with the kind of front sign that says masks required, in addition to all the other signage we got from the APTA Health and Safety Program. And then we've also posted, here, let me share my screen again. We've also posted some ads on Facebook and Twitter and just some additional posts. And with that, I'm just going to share some of the kind of feedback we got from it. So on all of those posts, we had around 11 posts across Facebook and Twitter and 2 ads that we posted. Of that, we got about 14 or 13,500 impressions, which means we didn't reach 13,000 people, but it just, our posts showed up on people's timelines and Twitter accounts approximately 13,500 times. And of that, around like 8,000 of that was from the paid ads that we promoted. And those 2 were targeted in different ways. One of them was targeted at people who didn't like our Facebook and Twitter accounts, but instead were kind of just interested in skiing, resorts, kind of that demographic. And then another was a boosted post that was kind of our riders that have already liked our page. So we got a really good response from that. And we spent around $85 just on that social media ad, but we got a really good response from it. And then across just all our regular posts, yeah, we got a lot of feedback and engagement. So in addition to that, we have posted flyers at bus stops, put an ad in the park record, and just some, again, the materials on the buses. All of that is just to kind of emphasize the message that this is what we're doing to make sure that we can kind of help limit the spread of COVID-19, and then also really emphasizing what we're asking our riders to do, which is wear a mask, distance on the buses when possible, and check the bus or check the app for crowded buses before you ride, and just kind of making sure that we're making smart decisions so we can help limit the spread. Did anyone have any questions about that? Sorry, that's kind of all over the place.
Okay, I guess if you want to hear Mayor Andy, you're going to have to ride the bus. And Steve, we did take your comments to heart last JTAB, where you pointed out that a lot of our folks that are riding are, not necessarily living in Park City and maybe didn't see our initial push of this campaign. So we're getting ready. This is kind of our Christmas push that we're doing right now, and we will continue to revive the interest in this campaign through the rest of the season.
Excellent, thank you.
Kim, this is Kim. I was wondering about, and this relates to looking at some of the numbers on the ridership report, but particularly the Park City, Salt Lake City Connect. And it seems like, the people that ride that, a lot of commuters down towards the University of Utah area. And this may just be total conjecture on my part, but it seems that a lot of people aren't riding now due to safety concerns. So I was wondering if that would be a particular area that we could target, or if there's another way that we could work to help educate people on, the measures that are being taken to, keep their health and safety at the forefront.
Yeah, that's a great idea. The Utah Transit Authority is actually participating in this national campaign as well. I don't know, though, what they're actively doing to revive the interest. So we could certainly reach out to them and do some kind of coordinated effort.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next slide. It's just basically questions, I believe. So do you guys have any questions about what was presented on our operational updates? Okay, hearing none.
Yeah.
Then,
Hey, I'm just wondering, traffic has started to increase with the resorts opening. Have you seen any decline in reliability, or are we still kind of steady in terms of reliability?
I believe we're still pretty steady. Robbie, if I'm misspeaking, please jump in here. But I don't think it's gotten to that point yet where we've seen a drastic impact, because it's been pretty short term.
Yeah, it's been above 90%, at least in the month of November. We'll be looking at that again here in a week or so to see what December is like.
Yeah. I'm just going off of the experience that they saw in the TOC, where, you know, traffic did start to back up, but then when they started pointing people to other parking areas, it got flowing again relatively quickly. So I don't think we've had the big traffic yet. I'm thinking the day after Christmas is what everybody's sort of gearing up for.
Yeah, Kim, as well. I noticed that the variable message boards are deployed out on our state highways, which tells me that the coordination between the resorts and all of us is happening. It's kind of my first clue of that. So it looks like it's started well.
Yes, thank you. We definitely think it did, but we certainly are going to do a debrief of our first weekend and see where, you know, we can improve things, and any lessons learned will be captured.
And I'll just share that you guys probably saw it because the text alert went out, but I was over skiing at PCMR on Saturday morning, and by God, it couldn't have been more than about 9:15, 9:30, the alert went out that said lot full. So I think we're going to see the impacts of people being less likely to take transit and less likely to pile into cars with people that aren't part of their pod kind of thing. And I have a feeling, and we're hearing it from Deer Valley as well already, even though there's not that terribly many people on the hill, they're already starting to talk about parking on the road around Deer Valley Drive. So I have a feeling parking at the ski resorts is going to be a big issue this winter.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a transit opportunity. So let's keep thinking about how, you know, when people keep bumping into lot full, how we manage to convince them to get on the bus. And I don't have a quick easy on that one, but that's certainly an opportunity.
Yes, great point. And, you know, we did see skiers on the bus this last weekend, so we're not just moving the transit dependent at this time. So I think they will come, not in the numbers from the past, but I thought that was a good sign that they were willing to get on the bus with their skis and their ski gear. All right, any other questions? Okay, Caroline, I believe you're on for operational update.
Yeah, I think Jamie's going to cover that for me. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So it's a lot like last month's report. We just keep ticking up. Things are getting better. If you look at this, I apologize. I left the circulator off of the ridership report for November, but we increased there, even though there was one less day between October and November. We were up almost 60 riders, I think 57 if I remember. So it just keeps getting a little bit better month by month. We're hoping that in December we had some frequency increases in the morning on the trailside loop just for a couple of hours that started December 1. And we also went back to 15-minute service on the circulator all day. So we're hoping that the next time we give you a ridership update, it looks even better. Any more detail? Does anyone want any more updates? Okay, thank you.
Let me just, one quick question, just for the Brown, it sounds like, you know, from reading things, you're starting to get some more people requesting kind of the, you know, the deviations. But are you getting any feedback, either positive or negative, from people about, you know, kind of the transition we made from the traditional Brown line to this, you know, trailside loop?
Yeah, you're asking the same questions we were asking of the contractor. We were really curious, as we have expected there would be a lot, and there hasn't been. They've been logging the calls that they get, and mostly it's just people calling to ask for rides or just specific service questions, but there hasn't been.
Okay.
I don't know, Park City has, they might have a different report than we do.
Yeah, the one that always worries me is a lot of times when we do our surveys and things, we do it like on the bus or at the bus stops. And the ones I always care about are the ones who chose not to go anymore. And so it's the ones we don't end up asking the questions because they've basically opted out. So at some point, it's hard with this COVID pandemic because we can't compare apples to apples, but it's something to keep an eye on is, you know, if we've lost people, they're not going to be the ones calling in. And I don't know how to judge that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good comment. I don't either. I've always struggled with that in transit. The latent riders, we call them.
Yeah.
They're out there. We just can't get them. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, at some point we've done things like in the city where it's been a bigger project where we've gone out and gone out of our way to try to survey people who literally aren't riders and ask the questions about why aren't you riding and that kind of thing. And that's not appropriate for this, but I just want to make sure, because this is an important transition, and I think it's kind of the map that we're expecting to see for the lime and the pink as, you know, some variation of this. And I just want to make sure that this is really getting the traction that we hope it is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comment as we move forward with a bunch of changes coming up, to keep an eye on that. We'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Jamie? Yeah, all right, I guess our next topic will be the additional mass transit tax overview. Caroline?
So let me share my screen, I guess. I was going to refer you, in case you're looking at your packet, it's on page 8 of your packet, but let me just share my screen. And you all can see this now, right? Okay, so JTAB members requested just a general overview of how the AMT has received revenue and been expended over the couple of years that we have had it in place. And the table you see on page 8 was, again, just intended to be that very broad overview. We, in general, our revenues were a bit over what we had projected before the taxes went into place in 2017. And we continue to expend those on the joint services, the circulator, the PC SLC Connect, and the white and the black. And I think the table is fairly self-explanatory, but if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer those. As you can see, there's a remaining balance of about 2.6 million in that joint holding account that will continue to go towards services identified jointly between Park City and Summit County. Are there any questions?
I should probably know this, but from the Park City Summit, Salt Lake Connect, it says midday. Is this, so this is just the bus that we added, it's not the bulk of it?
Yes.
How do we pay for the bulk of it? Is that split between us, and where does that money come from?
That's a 3-way contract between Park City, Summit County, and UTA, and both Summit County and Park City receive a separate invoice from UTA monthly for that service.
Okay, so that's not coming out of any of these tax quarters other than something that would have, I mean, it could have evolved from that, but it's not out of one of these operational things that we're doing kind of joint management of?
That's correct.
How much is that annually for the city and the county and UTA?
I have to do the math, but it ranges between, I'm sorry, I don't know this off the top of my head. It ranges between 25,000 and 32,000 a month total for each entity. I think that works out to, I don't know what that works out to. I can't remember, sorry.
You're saying that 25 to 32,000 is split among the 3 entities according to a formula. That's each entities.
That's each entity.
Well, that's more money than I recall you're saying that Summit County has 12 times 32,000?
I think it's about $700,000 a year total, but yes, each county, each entity of each of the 3 entities essentially has a distinct invoice, and it's all the same amount to each entity.
I thought that it was originally, we had a cap of like 185,000 a year that each entity was putting in. And if I do that math, it's a lot more than that.
The cap was to UTA, not to the other entities.
Uh-huh.
We probably, oh,
Go ahead, Kim.
we probably ought to have a deeper dive into this, maybe at the next meeting or.
Do we have a sense for what it's costing us per rider?
We do, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
Let's put it on the next meeting.
Okay.
I think there's another level on this one also, which is UTA was the first one. When revenues were generated, they went to offset UTA's payment, I believe. And I believe at some point in the not too distant past, UTA was getting enough from the revenue so that they're not contributing anymore. And it's just Summit County and Park City. But to everyone else's point, we're all a little foggy on the details of this because we really haven't talked about it in depth in a couple, 3 years, and maybe it's time to review.
Yes.
Yep, and Tim's spot on. That is the case. We can do a deeper dive during our next JTAB.
Yeah, I think this was really helpful. I appreciate you pulling this together, and it'll be interesting to see how the weird year of 2020 falls into this, since we really reduced our service. But I would offer that maybe for the next time we do this, if it's the next JTAB, part of this whole kind of new Snyderville Basin Transit District thing is we're going to have to kind of revisit what we do with these regional connections. And so to me, I would love to see kind of each one of them separate and detailed, and that would be the white separate from the black, separate from the total Park City Connect, Salt Lake Connect. And if we could see the three of those, and the reason I say separate the white and the black is it's not at all clear to me, at least, that we'll end up with the same solution for the white that we have for the black. We might, but we've at least had some discussion about we keep running the white and you guys pick up the black, but it would just help to separate those funds.
Absolutely, not a problem. We'll have a detailed discussion on that as well, and a staff report
at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the AMT, Caroline?
So let me, before we leave that one, let me just kind of, and I know this is early, but I just kind of want to see if there's an obvious slant. One of the things that had been discussed was if we get to a point where we're dropping the ILA for this particular tax quarter, that we would go back to, where the sales tax is actually generated, or we end up splitting the remaining money. And clearly we've got $2.5 million in there. I'm guessing there's probably going to be another $1 million or $2 million based on 2020 being such a weird year. Do you guys have any thoughts on how you see this tax quarter going forward? Should we separate it? Should we keep working it together? If so, how do we deal with the fact that we're generating money and it's kind of piling up? Any thoughts? And I'm not looking for a definitive answer. I just wonder if we can kind of at least maybe get on the same page.
I like the idea of taking those routes that are mutually beneficial. I mean, there may be some others that benefit one entity over another, but particularly with the white and the black, and there may be others that get developed along the way, but I would see those coming out of the AMT kind of right off the top, and we could split the remainder based on the point of sale.
I like that idea. What I would love to get to, and this is just going to be kind of a recurring theme with me on these, I'll call them these shared routes, regional routes, whatever we want to call them, is right now, as you guys know more than anybody, the whole accounting for these things has been obtuse, difficult, time consuming, where we're really trying to figure out what the white really cost and how that gets into bus maintenance and, you know, the bus stations and all this stuff gets piled into it. If we continue to do this, I would still love to get something cleaner and simpler from an accounting standpoint. So when we talk about, yeah, we're going to take the white out of this quarter, and my transit guys will probably hate me for this, but you know, if there was something we could do based on history that said, you know, every time we run a loop of the white, it costs us total aggregate amount, including all the little add-ins and everything, it costs us $100, whatever it is. And so when we turn around and say, look, we're going to jointly pull the money out of the white, the only question is, gee, out of the last month or the last quarter or whatever, how many circles did it do for the white bus? And we multiply that times the $100, and that's the bottom line. And I want to get out of this thing where you guys are having to audit us and we're having to keep track of 9,000 different things so that we can share it. And if we can get to something really simple and still pull the money out jointly, I would love that.
Well, I'll chime in as kind of the administrators of the transit service. We would too, and our hope is working with Benjamin and the new team. That's ultimately a goal. I think we're going to be assisted by the fact that when the county is running their own services with V, Steve, it will simplify things for us to a great extent. A lot of our billing methodology, where we have so many overlapping services and administrative costs and overhead. But I'll just say amen. I mean, that's the direction that we're headed, and we fully agree. We would love to have that simplicity and that added level of transparency and accountability.
Yeah, and at some point, if we trust the numbers that we've had for the last 2 years on the white, again, the pandemic's such a mishmash, but you know, if you took 2018, 2019 and took the white line and, you know, again, if my simplistic view of the world was the right one that said, how many white trips did we do in 2018 and what was the total cost? How many did we do in 2019 and what was the total cost? Throw in some inflation thing, and at some level you're done. You know, you don't have to go back and rework all of this stuff, or I hope we don't anyway.
Okay. I have one question about the AMT, Caroline, if I could, if it's appropriate. And I just forget, when you had that chart up, I can't recall, and I should, because I've done so much work on this, but what was the decision on the Kimball Junction circulator? Like this isn't loaded or a loaded question at all. I just can't recall the origin of that decision to take that out of the AMT.
Yeah, so when we were talking about the services that could be funded through the AMT, both staff came together and we jointly identified a list of services that year 1 through 5 would be funded through this AMT, and the circulator was one of those services.
Okay, thank you.
Also, yeah, just to follow up, Jamie has figured out the cost per rider for the PCSLC Connect. Pre-COVID, it was about very roughly $30 a passenger, but during the pandemic, it's about $109 a passenger.
Ouch.
So is that's total cost that doesn't take into account any of the shares and revenue that goes back to who and all that kind of stuff. Got it.
Right. There's no fare box recovery calculated in that or anything like that. That's just cost all in.
And to be fair, COVID's just thrown those numbers, you know, just completely turned the model on top of its head. So
yes.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on the AMT? It sounds like we got a couple agenda items for next meeting. So is there any other agenda items that you would like to see in the next JTAB? Or if you want to think about it, certainly email me and we can get those added.
Let me just throw this out. I think this is probably staff working on this, and I've kind of already talked to our team about it, but I would love to see the city and the county have a plan that's kind of, at least at a high level, month by month, what we have to get done to get to July 1st. And, you know, that to me ought to be driving our JTAB calendars, because there ought to be, you know, for anything that has to get done in March, it probably needs to be, you know, teed up for the first time in January and a second time in February, so that we can actually close on it in March. And I don't know, you know, I could kind of make up my list, but I've never seen that list. And so I would offer, if you guys between Kim and Caroline and Tom and Matt and whatever and Sarah, you guys could agree on a high level calendar month by month, then I would say take that, sit down and figure out what that means for JTAB.
Okay, work on that. Great. Well, it looks like our next meeting will be January 19th of 2021 at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday. And we've reached the end of our agenda. Is there any other discussion or questions that you would like to bring up before the meeting adjourns?
Can I ask the county councilors on here that, you know, I sat in and listened to the last discussion you guys had about the transit district, and I know you were going to go off and have meetings after that. Can you describe just a quick update on kind of where you are and when it would go back to the full county council that we could kind of listen into?
As far as what particular aspect, Steve? As far as the ordinance?
Yeah, you guys were, I mean, there was a bunch of questions, and I guess the most relevant to us is we keep kind of watching, trying to figure out what, if any, role we have and how we would be dealing with this thing and what the leadership will look like and whether we have any part at all, either non-voting or, you know, whatever. And it's, you know, in that last meeting, you guys had a lot of questions, and it got kind of held off to get some more detail in there. So I just wonder if, you know, where would the ordinance be? And then I guess the second question I have is where you guys on the, you know, when would we expect to see the next thing come back on your studies that the company, I can't remember the company, but they're doing the, what should your transit look like for the basin?
So Kim, I'll cover the agenda item.
Okay.
The ordinance is on the agenda tomorrow at 4:35 p.m. approximately. So that's the next time publicly it will be discussed by the council.
Okay.
And it's on for possible adoption. And then Caroline can answer the question about planning, our planning with VIA.
Yeah, we are still targeting January, and we're on track for January for an initial draft of some service mix that we want to think about. I talked to Kim last week, Kim Felstead. I've been trying to keep her updated just when we have ideas or concepts that we're throwing around. Just because I don't want to bring her something and say, this is what we'd like to do, and then have to have you react. I'm trying to keep Kim in the loop so you can start thinking about preparations as well. But in terms of a draft service concept, still January timeline.
Okay, thank you. I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Any other items?
I just want to say thank you to everybody. This will be my last JTAB.
Ooh.
So,
Well, Kim could always participate. You can continue to participate.
And I just very well may.
Well, thanks, Kim.
Hopefully I'll have more free time to actually ride the bus.
Yeah, it's been great having you on JTAB. Thanks for all the good work you've done over the years.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Kim.
Steve, I've enjoyed working with everybody and getting to know you all, and look forward to more good things.
Hear, hear.
All right. Well, if that is everything, then do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting today?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks. Take care. Stay well.